Especially when you're a data scientist at Amazon, a lot of people think, quote unquote, you made it. But you still struggle with, say, you're Googling SQL queries, or sometimes you have challenges with data projects. It's important to tell people the real world kind of data scientist life.
The hamster wheel that people get into is they think about building the community before they have something that they can offer a community.
If you look at the YouTube thumbnail and the titles, everybody's going for the more controversial. You always see the surprise look. Sometimes I wonder, do people get fatigue of that? What if I create a YouTube channel and just go for the super peaceful, relaxing vibe? Would people want to watch?
Matching the thumbnails and titles to the content is where I've had the most success. But I don't want to be thinking about that stuff. I want to just make things that I think are valuable, rather than things that I think will necessarily go viral.
If I let go of this data scientist identity, this ex-Amazon senior data scientist label, who am I? Would my audience still like me? I'm a recovering people pleaser. I want to meet people's expectation, but sometimes forget to really have the courage or creativity to go for the things that I want to do.
Daliana, welcome to the Kensner's Neighbors podcast. It's a long time coming. I loved going on your show, and I'm excited we could run it back this direction.
Yeah. Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. So I would imagine a lot of people are familiar with the Data Scientist Show, but they're probably a little bit less familiar with your story. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how you first got interested in data. Was there a pivotal moment that got you interested in the field, or was it more of a little slow progression over time?
Yeah. So in college, I studied applied math, which is not very applicable. It was very theoretical. And I didn't know what kind of job I can do after I graduated. And at that time, we started to have this minor called statistics. I just feel, you can apply certain framework to solve a problem, to apply it in the real world. And I remember I read an essay when I applied to UC Irvine. I felt, it's kind of like a fashion designer. You design different costume for different type of people. And that's how I got into statistics. And after I finished my master's degree, I got a job as a BI data analyst. That was my kind of first job in data. And later got into Amazon. My title was a little confusing. Official title was BI engineer / statistician, because I have the background in statistics. I think at that time, there wasn't the data scientist title, and you need someone to build a dashboard, run some SQL, but also doing statistical analysis. I was on the team that worked on a lot of like A/B testing. So we work with software engineers, product managers, and often you have to wear different hats. Sometimes you're like an advisor, you give trainings. So it was really fun. And later, I got interested in machine learning because of the hype. And also I wanted to work on a larger data set. I want to just adding more things to my toolkit. So I moved to a team in Amazon Web Services called the Machine Learning Solutions Lab. And we work with AWS customers and build custom solution for them. So something really fun I worked on was to build a soccer goal prediction using video data. And so that's kind of how I got into data science and become a data science generalist. I'm sure you're going to ask me how did I pivot to some other path, but that's the original story.
That's amazing. And so you sort of went in the big tech route. You learned a bunch of skills there. You were able to develop and create a nice career there. I know for a fact that you ended up going to more startup type roles after that. Can you talk to me about that transition and what that experience was like? And then maybe a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So after I got promoted to a senior data scientist, I felt a little bit lost. Previously, I was very excited. I'm going to hit this goal. I want to have that senior data scientist title. And then I realized I have the opportunity to become a manager. I did try to become a manager on a different team. I like the problem we're working on, but I realized, I'm going to have a lot of meetings and a lot of things are out of my control, are not data science related. So around the same time, maybe a few years earlier, kind of during pandemic, I started to create content on LinkedIn. Because a lot of people ask me, how do you get into data science? How do you get into Amazon? And I felt frustrated about a lot of SEO focused articles online, about data science. They're not accurate. They say things that you have to know kind of 10 technical skills. But what we're dealing with is how to clean, dirty data, how to talk to stakeholders. And I felt passionate about sharing those things. And then realized, okay, I like content creation. I like teaching. Maybe I can be a machine learning instructor. Or I also talked to the developer relation team in AWS, I guess it's under the marketing team to explore those type of roles. So I was thinking about maybe transition into a more, I would say, public facing role, but still in data science and AI. And I had those conversations, but I feel it's still a little different from what I wanted to do because you are going to be very focused on company's message, and how you get evaluated is by, for example, how many people viewed your content or sign up for your events. I think that's a little stressful for me, so I didn't take that route. And I also started my podcast around the same time because I always like having one-on-one conversations with people, and I like listening to podcasts. So I think when I got about 100K followers on LinkedIn, I started my podcast. And I got a job in startup because one guest I interviewed on my podcast, Kyle Kreenan, he works at NVIDIA. He knows the one of the co-founders of the startup I later worked at, and he organized some happy hour. I met them, and I think I talked to them a little bit about developer advocate, building a community. They wasn't even thinking about having someone to help them with developer relations. And after the happy hour, the founder reached out to me, hey, do you want to chat? So that's how I got a role. But my title was still senior data scientist. I was creating some tutorials, doing some technical work. I don't think I ever fully step into the developer advocate role. So that's why I still have the data scientist title. I feel that's kind of, I don't know, I like to have that identity and still writing some code, do analysis, learning new things. And what was the other question?
No, I was going to ask what you
Yeah.
got into a little bit after that. But to me, I wanted to rewind into the developer advocate role, because you said something I thought was really interesting. What you said was that a lot of these roles are asking you to hit specific metrics around viewership or event attendance, a lot of these things. And that is something I struggle with companies. I think that is a flawed approach to developer advocacy for brand growth and all these things. Yes, it's good to get followers. Yes, it's good to get viewership. But the way that you get viewership, if you're just indexing for numbers, can be problematic, because what gets more viewership? Controversial things.
Right.
So do you want to hire a developer advocate and really force them to hit numbers, and then they're just going to make more and more controversial stuff, or stuff that isn't necessarily good for the company image or for the long-term goals of the company? And one of the things I've learned, especially with working with a lot of sponsors and things along those lines, is the best sponsors are the ones that work with you for a long time, and then you become a natural advocate for them. And it's more about the truly end goal of the company. Let's say I'm a large business and the goal is to land one more client, and one more client gets me $2 million for a really big contract.
Right.
If For example, I made a video for them and it got 2 views, and one of those views was a sale for them.
Oh, wow.
That's not something that's happened, but it's a hypothetical. That's a great ROI for them, right? And whatever they paid me, it would be immaterial compared to that. And a lot of companies equate these high viewership with high conversion, and that is not the case. Like sometimes the best thing you can do is make a video or produce content that is only seen directly by B2B partners or something along those lines. And that creates huge ROI because it's an authentic take, it's a well manicured, and it tells you a really good story about the product. But a lot of companies are way too wrapped up in the metrics and these types of things, which you're just indexing for the wrong stuff. Like what you should care about is one, your overall brand, which is really hard to quantify, but if you have goodwill associated with it, very important, or actual conversions, actual sales that are made. And most companies I work with are B2B because you're not going to maximize a lot of these products with like B2C stuff. That is a lot harder game to play. And it's just stressful for everyone involved because I know developer advocates that are constantly stressed because they're trying to hit numbers, but do numbers equate to product performance or money? Not always. So we just talked about developer advocacy. You obviously recently moved out of that role and you're doing some new stuff. Can you tell me a little bit what's going on there?
Yeah. To add your comment on developer advocacy, I agree with you. I think it's very hard to measure ROI, direct ROI, because it's very top of the funnel. I think a lot of companies realize they need to have someone to build community, but they also don't know how to measure success. I don't think it's they just want to give developer advocate a lot of pressure. I think, for example, if you are a marketing VP, you have to give investor some reports and you have to quantify things. I think every time I talk to someone, they ask me, what do I think? And I don't think there's a standard playbook. It depends on the stage of your company. It depends on the persona you want to reach out to. Also, maybe for some companies, your goal to get started, just put out some content and experiment with. Maybe at a certain stage, you realize certain channel works pretty well, and then you start to like care about metrics. And also, a lot of people working as a developer advocate, they like burn out. And because their manager want them to do everything all the time. So it's also important to focus on 1 or 2 channels. And also, if you are interested in this type of role, it's very different. When you are an engineer or data scientist, you write a blog about your work. It's very exciting and you get the attention. People reach out to you. It's different when that's your full-time job, right? And sometimes in certain roles, you have to fly to different cities, give talks, and sometimes when your passion become a full-time job, that can be different. I would say if you're curious about the role, maybe try to create some content, give some talks, and if you interview for those roles, ask how those roles are evaluated. Do the founders know the value of you just helping the community, or are they very fixated on the metrics?
I think that was a good distinction you made, is developer advocate necessarily reporting to a VP of marketing. I think marketing can be evaluated in terms of analytics a lot more effectively. Advocacy is just as you said. Half of it to me is content and community, and the other half is a little bit of marketing. But I would argue that it can be evaluated most effectively in the early stages by essentially documentation and example creation. To me, those are the best use cases. And those are the things that produce the best types of communities, because if you have resources for communities to use, you can build a community around it. If you're just trying to get people in and you don't have value that you're created or documentation or things that are easy to use, then they're just going to leave because other places have better documentation. And I think that's the hamster wheel that people get into, is they think about building the community before they have something that they can offer a community. And I really like that distinction that you made.
Yeah, and also you can diversify your work, because there might be very volatile the metrics. how many people sign up for events or read your blog posts. But like you mentioned, you can help create some tutorials. Those type of evergreen contents are always going to be there on the website, on your company's YouTube channel. So you can have those as your work artifact if you want a promotion or something on your resume. So it's not always relying on how much attention you get for your company.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation-grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high-performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show.
Yes, I think that hopefully people who are running companies or in charge of developer advocate roles listen to this, because you sort of get trapped in your own bubble, and I think you just need to step back and take a look at it from the big picture, long-term perspective, which is hard to do, especially with how company incentive structures work. But if you think about it from that perspective, I think you're dramatically further along in 5 years than from someone who is trying to really push the other stuff over that same period of time.
Yeah. So what I'm doing now.
Yes. What are you doing now?
Yeah. So I haven't announced on LinkedIn yet, but I quit my full-time job at a startup 6 months ago, last September. So I always wanted to be entrepreneur. I think sometimes when I create content, I forgot what made me want to create content in the first place. I think the first piece of content I created was, I still live in Seattle. I worked at Amazon. I create a analysis using Zillow data to see whether there's a month where the rent is always cheaper than the other, because I move all the time. And I thought it's just so fun to create some story using public data, because I was thinking I don't see myself retiring in a big company. Maybe someday I will have a data science consulting company, and maybe I need to write some blog posts, kind of like what Seattle Data Guy did. So that was my intention. I will have some consulting business. That's how I started writing technical blogs. And then I realized writing technical blogs sometimes takes a lot of time. And around the same time, I also got interested in the career-related content. I realized my friends always ask me for advice, or sometimes I want to give people unsolicited advice and they don't want to listen. So what do? You shout out on the internet, you give strangers advice. And I think I really enjoy empowering people. A lot of people have fears about asking for a promotion or even applying for a job. I remember the same feeling. It's just really weird. Like, nobody can see me when I apply for the job. But when I feel I'm not qualified, I just feel there's this invisible force holding me back. So then I feel more interested into talk about my career, and especially when you're a data scientist at Amazon, a lot of people think kind of quote unquote you made it, but you still struggle with, say, you're Googling SQL queries, or sometimes you have challenges with data projects. You don't know what you're doing, and everybody is building the plane while flying it. I think it's important to tell people the real world kind of data scientist life, whether you're in big companies or small companies. So that's why I started to share a lot of kind of data science realities posts on LinkedIn. And when I started a podcast, I interview a lot of data science practitioners who don't have a big platform like me. Because I don't feel your skill set in data science is proportional to how many followers you have online. And I want to give them a platform. And I just really enjoy with content. I can go into any directions that I want to go. And also the the passion for being an entrepreneur is always there. So I kind of feel maybe there's a path for me to do something on my own. And there are different ways. Sometimes you create a course, or you started to have companies who want to sponsor you. So I tried a little bit of both. I did a career course last year called Advanced Your Data Science Career. I taught a course on Maven. I wanted to focus on a small cohort to learn about whether I enjoy doing this, or whether people needed it. So I didn't even market a lot. But I have some people joined. What I realized is always win over time. So it's scheduled for, say, 2 hours, and I would go for 3-4 hours. And after that, I noticed, I still have a lot of energy. So I really enjoy doing that. At this moment, I'm not doing a lot of career coaching, but I want to get back to it. So I'm still exploring different type of format. For example, I'm organizing a series of meetup called the Tired Data Scientist. I just want to be a little bit more brave, but be a little bit more quirky. If you know me as a friend, in my personality, I'm not like a super serious person. So I want to bring that to my coaching, my content. Maybe I would explore this group coaching as a business. I will have partnerships, or people might want to pay for more tailored kind of experience. Or maybe I would do more one-on-one coaching, maybe not just for data scientists, but people in tech in general, when they want to transition their career, move to a different role. And at this moment, I think right before I quit my job, I would say most of my income is through partnerships with other companies through the podcast. I will help them create some educational contents that useful for my audience, and also talk about their founder's journey, their product. And I previously had some reservation. I feel, if you start make money on your content, are you a sellout? I don't know if you felt that way. I'm curious about your opinion. But then I realized, we all work for a company. You either work for a company like Amazon, Google, or like now for example, I could work for 5 companies and 10 companies doing similar things. And also I have more say on what I want to do. So usually when I talk to a sponsor, I would mention I want to make sure this content is useful for my audience, even if nobody signed up for the product. And I think now with content marketing, more and more companies realize that's the way to go. You have to educate people. You cannot just say, hey, sign up for my product. You have to make people feel they enjoy the event, they learn something, and that's how you build trust. So I really enjoy working with a few companies through my podcast and on LinkedIn. I want to continue to do that, but at the same time, I want to also focus more on this career coaching thing I'm exploring. So maybe a little bit of a hybrid, and how much I do partnership depends on how much I invest or enjoy the coaching business I'm interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And to the point about the sponsors and working with companies, I think most people don't realize how many sponsors that we turn down.
Yeah.
I probably have 100 sponsors that have reached out to work with, and I've maybe worked with 5% of them.
Yeah.
And the idea is that I think all of us will really only work with sponsors that we believe in. That's a product that we would necessarily use.
Right.
Even, for example, Posit sponsored this meetup that we're doing.
Yeah.
We had probably 10, 12 calls before that, making sure that the brands and stuff were aligned, that they weren't asking us to do anything that we would find inauthentic, that we really understood their products and the open source nature. I mean, I think all of us probably have rules.
Yeah.
My big rule is generally, I don't think I've ever broken this, maybe once, is that the products, if they're software products that I work with, they have free options.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So that to me is the fairest way, is that if I'm going to have my audience do something, they should at least have some access to that product for free.
Right.
Because then they can try it out themselves and they're not just hooked into necessarily a buying decision. There's some things that, if it's not a software product, might be different. If it's like, oh, I love this supplement that I use and they're sponsoring me, that's probably a little bit of a different story. But to me, that is how I view the domain. And I would hope that people listening want these things to continue. Sometimes, especially if people are doing this full time, it makes it easier to do these things and keep producing good content if we have sponsors, if they're monetizable. I mean, for example, today my video editor extraordinaire videographer is behind the camera, and the sponsors and the different forms of revenue I make it possible for me to pay him to save me basically 10 hours in editing every single week, whatever it might be. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But the idea is that the consumers get a better product, get more information, they get more value because of the sponsors. And it's a small sacrifice in the term of 30 seconds or like a story that's told through a different, like not a different lens, but a story told by a specific person. That to me is a small price to pay for dramatically better content and better value that comes out of it. So that is how I've always viewed it. Of course, there's always going to be people that are like, oh, are they selling out, whatever it might be. But you look anywhere and everything has a small trade-off. I mean, of course,
you work for a company. Yeah. You talk about your company product, right?
Yeah. I mean, the other option is, you have a Patreon or you have some of these types of things, but there's a tangible financial cost to that I prefer not to have. I would assume, and if I'm wrong about this, audience, please tell me. But I would assume people would rather hear a short thing by a sponsor that might potentially be useful and interesting to them rather than paying directly money. I will take money, absolutely. I mean, I don't have any of those things set up. I fully bought in and assume that the other model is superior.
Yeah.
But if I'm wrong about that, please let me know.
Yeah. And also, I was surprised. A few of the episodes that I collaborated with CEOs of other data companies sponsored episodes are ranked top out of my entire episode pool. So, for example, the one I did with Bart Moses from Monte Carlo Data and Chase Sharma from Apple, those are like top 5 episodes. So they really putting a lot to help me co-create the content. And I didn't realize this before, because if I didn't work with them, I would never have those episodes. I didn't know my audience are interested in those topics.
Yeah. Precisely. So what's the kind of evolution of the podcast? What are the next steps? Where do you hope to go with that?
Yeah, so the podcast, now I added the live elements. So for example, when I work with Apple, they build A/B testing platforms. We do live webinars. Previous live webinars, I just recorded it and then kind of once it's done. But now I want to turn it into a video, a podcast. So when someone's not attending, they can still have access to that. And every time I host something live, it feels different when you see the comments, when people ask questions, the engagement just feels different. So I want to do maybe more type of live podcast, but I need more support. Maybe someone help me to set up how YouTube Live and camera stuff work. I'm not that tech savvy. Yeah, like if you have ever seen my setup, I'm still using my MacBook as the camera. I want to upgrade my production quality. So yeah, I want to do more live events, both online and in person. And for my podcast, I think I'm just more and more interested in the career side of things, or say personal growth for tech people. I know it's like a big word. To be more specific, I think help people figure out what kind of career is a good fit for their personality or the lifestyle they're seeking, and not just get biased by all the influencers talk about, oh, I work at this FANG company, it's great. So, and also, like I mentioned before, overcome some fear, because if you think about a lot of fear we have regarding asking for a promotion or apply for a job, it's not just like imposter syndrome. It could be some fear deeply rooted maybe in your some childhood experience. Maybe your parents were critical. Maybe you had a teacher that criticized some initiative you wanted had in, I don't know, elementary school. And I think those things are very interesting to me. Is there a way that can help people resolve those issues, going deeper and make them feel empowered in their career, or they want to quit their job and do something else? And just because I quit my full-time job, I don't think it works for everyone. If you enjoy your full-time work, especially working data, if you enjoy working on AI or some data engineering project with large data set, you have to kind of work in a large company. There's nothing bad about it, but I think people do need to know they can make choices. They have choices. I think it's just a lot of times we feel we live in this bubble of Silicon Valley. That's where I live. We just follow other people. Oh, they're become a staff engineer and buy a house, and that's gonna be my next career goal. I hope I can empower more people to design a life that work for themselves. And also, I feel people are a little lonely these days. So I was joking with my friends, even if people listen to my podcast, didn't learn anything, but they listen to it brushing their teeth, feel less lonely. I think that's a win for me.
I like that. Yeah, I think that there's so much content out there around a very specific lifestyle in tech of, oh, I work at a FANG, Mongo, whatever it is type of company. That, again, that might be it for some people. They really enjoy that. I completely respect that. And I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't have to be the only lifestyle path. And we're both similar in the mission to be able to, my focus is getting to know the people in the data domain, because you get to see how vast and different everyone is. Mm-hmm. And you realize if everyone is doing the same job, probably a very small subsegment of them would be really happy. Yeah. And to me, that is such an interesting thing, is who are my coworkers? Who might I go into work with? You realize that there's a lot of people you would really get along with. Maybe there's some people that you don't align necessarily ideologically. Mm-hmm. For example, I love Shashank. He is one of my really good friends. We see the world in different ways. And I actually genuinely like that. And that makes for a good podcast. That makes for amazing conversations. But a lot of the time, people don't realize that him and I want different things because we view the world differently. But we can still be friends, obviously. And it makes us maybe better friends because we're not always just agreeing with each other, right? And so I think that there's so much to being able to unpack and understand the people that we might work with and the different options that are out there. For example, maybe 3 years ago, people really didn't know anything about developer advocacy. They didn't even realize that was an option. Even 10 years ago, the idea of creating content for a living and being a podcast host was completely foreign and largely unrealistic for anyone. And I think that now, where you can shed light on these different options, even within a domain, that is such a powerful thing to be able to help people. We learn, unfortunately, I found, we learn not from the theorems, not from the theory of, oh, this is what might make the most sense for people on the whole. We learn from the individual stories that are told, and it's inefficient, but it is probably a better overall way for people to to grow and get by and evolve in their career and also in their life.
Yeah.
I mean, I named the show Ken's Nearest Neighbors because it is a little data science-y, but I'm as interested, if not more interested, in understanding people's lives and decisions. They usually intersect with data at some point, but there's so much more to everyone, for example, at this meetup, but for you and for me, than just data science. And I think that that's also something that's special and we should celebrate.
Yeah, I think it's great you put this event together and we all get to meet each other.
Thanks. Well, I want to turn this around on you. You're obviously a podcaster. You want to put your podcast hat on. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Yeah. So yeah, I think you choose this format to focus on people's stories. What are something unexpected about your guests you learned?
In terms of unexpected, the biggest one is always that they come from very different backgrounds. Some come from music, some come from teaching, some come from psychology. And I believe the prevailing wisdom, especially from maybe more of the pop data analysis, data science content that's short and non-nuanced, is that there's one correct way to get into a field. There's correct things to do to advance your career. And on a broad level, like maybe there's some themes, but everyone's story is very unique. And there's different advice for different people based on where they're starting or where they want to go. For example, something that I've changed my perspective on a little bit. I used to be really hardcore that you don't need a master's degree to break into the field. I think one, that might have changed a little bit just because the overall level of education has gone up, but that's also very relevant to your unique background and how you approach learning. Someone who's just a really good hacker, loves to get their hands dirty all the time, they're just going to be bored sitting in classes, and it's not going to make any sense for them. Someone who maybe needs a little more structured education, maybe has a non-technical background coming from, could make sense to do something like that. Yeah. And so what I love about long form podcasting too, is you get to get into the nuance of things rather than just saying platitudes. And I think, for example, YouTube is good for being able to get into nuance as well. But there's such a trend towards short form. And I don't think there's anything wrong with short form. I think they're great short form content creators. But I think short form has a tendency for us to oversimplify a lot of the complexities of people as well as a job market or even the domain. And so I really relish this opportunity to try to talk through things in completeness rather than trying to give people bite-sized things to take home, because it's usually never that simple.
Yeah. And you're also a YouTuber. So if you look at the YouTube thumbnail and the titles, everybody's going for the more controversial. You always see the surprise look. Sometimes I wonder, do people get fatigue of that? Sometimes I just feel very rebellious. What if I create a YouTube channel and just go for the super peaceful, relaxing vibe? Would people want to watch?
So at least for me, I personally had fatigue of making a lot of that type of content and trying to win clicks over other competing things. It just gets more and more extreme. I think that the trend is going the other direction now, is a lot more personality based and things along those lines. That's one of the reasons why I really am leaning more heavily into podcasting. I think long form is just, for me, to create a better form of content. It's way less stressful, and there's also less showiness to it. I think that the thumbnail and the title and getting that right, some people love to play that game.
Yeah.
I personally don't. And I also think for educational content, it's different. A Mr. Beast style thumbnail for a educational video, in my opinion, actually creates dissonance, because they're going and you're showcasing that it's going to be super exciting, and then you're just coding for an hour or something, right? That doesn't necessarily match up in the way that I think that, again, people have oversimplified, right? You hear all of the YouTube people talking about thumbnails and these creator experts, and then you realize that, yes, that works great for their niche, but for my niche, which is way more education focused, it doesn't necessarily do the same thing. And so matching the thumbnails and titles to the content is where I've had the most success. But I don't want to be thinking about that stuff. I want to just make things that I think are valuable, rather than things that I think will necessarily go viral. And I think that podcasting, creating a core audience, that's a more effective way to just build a small community and have it consistently grow rather than these peaks and valleys. I prefer this lifestyle dramatically more.
Yeah. when I started to create content on LinkedIn, I also read a lot of books, tutorials about copywriting, because social media is essentially copywriting, and sometimes spend time to think about my first sentences. How can I make it go viral? It's a fun game to play. I think I definitely learned a lot about, say, human psychology or marketing. But after, say, 1 or 2 years posting every day, I also feel the fatigue. And sometimes I even cringe looking at some posts I made before. I think most of the opinions, I still agree with those. But I think sometimes you, maybe as 1 or 2 posts, you're just thinking about going viral. And I don't think that's good for, mental health or relationship with the audience. And also, I think last year, maybe around the same time I quit my job, I think LinkedIn changed their algorithm. So my reach and engagement is actually maybe half, or even say just a third of what it was before. And it gave me some anxiety, because thinking about working with partnership and sponsorships, although some of them, they don't just measure clicks or views, but still they look at how many people register for their events. So that just feels like, oh, my business kind of relying on this, and what I'm going to do. So luckily I have a newsletter. I think the newsletter performance is consistent, but also make you think, do you really want to play this game to consistently get people's attention? And if after 20 years, are those LinkedIn posts you put out, even if it went viral, are they still going to be useful for people? What's my impact out there? So right now, my reach is less. And to be honest, if you ask me, okay, if you put a lot of effort in it, can I get it back? I think I can get it back. I know how to get it back. Maybe I need to say some controversial, post some photos. And there's nothing wrong about people posting photos, say controversial things. I think actually I made a post say you should feel good to trying things, and feel you have the permission to be cringy, right? We're all learning your own style if it feels good for you. I don't think that's the style that works for me. But who knows? Maybe I also try some, photos or videos. But because I have less engagement, actually make me feel more free. I can say whatever, it's not going to go viral. Because when it go viral, yeah, it's exciting. People like my content, but you also feel, oh my gosh, there's a lot of eyeballs on my profile and scrutiny. Sometimes people's comments are a little bit hurtful. It's very stressful. So I think having those up and downs also helped me to cultivate the mentality to be more stoic. But if you know me as a person, I no way I'm like a stoic person. But at a specific moment, you realize I maybe have a little bit distance to the engagement. Like I'm not the numbers of followers, and I think it definitely helped me to think about what is important for me. What type of content do I want to invest, and what kind of long-term game am I playing?
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. I've been very much trying to index more for slow, consistent community growth,
Yeah.
rather than these peaks and valleys. And I think virality, it disrupts the uniformity of a community. And I'm saying uniformity in a good way, in the sense that if a lot of people agree with your message and they listen to all your content, I'd rather have 1,000 advocates than 10,000 people that loosely follow or are just generally interested in what I do. And if you can grow that over time, I think that is way more valuable in the long term, and you can actually feed that audience more effectively. If you have a huge audience, but they have varying interests, then what you create it gets confusing about what you should create. If you are either have a very clear vision of what you want to create and you just keep making that, people will self-select over time and be able to do that, assuming it's good.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably okay and less stressful. Like, if I was starting more stuff now, it's almost refreshing to be in the early stages of producing something because there's no pressure. Yes, you want it to go fast, but you can make it exactly how you want it. And your small community can give you honest feedback and it can improve. Whereas with viral content, with these types of things, it's just as you said, stressful because there's competing demands on what people want from you.
Yeah.
And I would like to have less of that and more of just nice, like, hey, we really like this. We think we could help you improve, give feedback, like real, honest, value-driven things.
Yeah. One thing I observed that's interesting is although a regular LinkedIn post gets less views and engagement, but whenever I organize online or offline events, I get similar attendees. So I think my hypothesis was LinkedIn generally doesn't like you to kind of add links, maybe. So previously, whenever I post an event I'm hosting, the engagement is generally less than like I post about my opinion. So it's already, have less engagement for those posts, but now it's just kind of stay the same whenever I post a link. So maybe that's a good thing. I still like to meet my audience. I can host more events. And also I think just because I've been creating content for say 3-4 years, I sometimes still have fears to post new ideas. And I think, yeah, it's just like a journey. You have to constantly try and explore new things. And it's maybe also because I had more audience, so sometimes I'm scared of being a little controversial, even if it's something I believe in. So that's something I'm working on, that to just have more courage in content. But also sometimes I check myself, okay, this courage, is it because you just want to have more attention? Is it because of your ego, or you actually feel this idea would help people?
Yeah. No, that makes that resonates a lot with me, is the idea of courage, the idea of trying new things. I'm a firm believer that so much content now is derivative. Yeah. And that's okay. It's okay to put your own spin on a similar topic. But if you look at it on like TikTok or something along those lines, you have all these trends that people are just essentially copying. Like you just copy the trend and that's how you gain virality. And, there's nothing wrong with that if it's fun and whatever it is. But to me, that is incredibly, it's hollow. It doesn't feel fulfilling to me.
Right.
Because what I love is to be, one of the things I really liked about the data science based on YouTube is I could make whatever I wanted and it was relatively novel. Like, people weren't publicly saying these things.
Yeah.
It was my own journey into it. And I wasn't jaded or I wasn't influenced by other forces. I could really put my own spin on whatever it was. And I really believe that putting your own spin on things now is a little bit discouraged in terms of how the algorithms work. Because if you're doing something new, there's not really much to stick to in terms of the type of content that you would recommend it, because it's different, because it's new.
Yeah.
And so I struggle when I see a lot of the new content, because it seems like it's just one person parroting another person and they know it's going to be consistent and get views. The risk of having something that bombs to a lot of people is not worth the reward of potentially being an innovator.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit sad in my mind as we view content, right? As we do this around. I mean, there's plenty of people that, like the biggest video I ever had to like how I'd learned data science if I could start over.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's one of the most copied like themes of anybody, and that's fine. Like, they put a different spin on it, whatever it is. But I've tried to, from there, I've done that same video a couple of years, and I stopped recently. But I've tried to make something kind of new and non-derivative, like that was, with not great success. But I've copied other concepts and had a lot of success. But I was like, man, like, it doesn't feel like it was for me. It doesn't feel like my idea or the concept that I put through really was as compelling. And maybe that's an ego thing, maybe just like you're describing, but like that is why I make content, is to be able to say, oh, like my spin, the thing that I'm producing, I believe was valuable and meaningful to people outside of it just caught their attention.
Yeah.
And, it's just, I guess, even boils down to the topic or the concept that maybe I'm really insecure. Jeez.
No, I think there's a difference between being an artist and being a business. If
Yeah.
you're a business, you're selling something, you can hire other content creators, you focus on the metrics, the funnels, you do whatever, go viral. But it sounds to me you are an artist. You want the thing to be original, even if, it doesn't make you a lot of money. So I think sometimes I also trying to think, okay, am I an artist or am I a business? If I'm a business, do I take myself out of equation and then just allow the artistic me creating whatever content I'm interested in? Or am I this, one person hybrid artist business? So I'm still trying to figure this out. So
that is brilliant. That is such a good way to put it. And I think you just helped me understand what it is. So I understand everything is derivative. I think that there's very few original ideas. Totally get that. And 100% some of the best ideas that I have come from other things that I've seen. But I think it's the order of the like degrees of freedom from the difference. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to take this model and just copy it and dedicate it based to my domain, to me, that's only 1 degree different than something. Where I find the most value is, oh, I have this breadth of knowledge. I'm reading, I'm constantly absorbing information, and all of these things naturally feed into a new idea. So it's not just 1 step away, it's probably like 2, 3, 4 steps away. So without a doubt, what I'm seeing is informed by other things, but it's the combination of these multiple forces that I'm like, oh, this is something that's more originally mine, rather than just like, oh, I saw this, I'm just going to do it 1 step over. And I didn't realize it would be that clear to me that it was that style of difference. But
yeah. But speaking of business, I'm curious. So I don't know if you ever share with the audience, what is the business side of things of Kenji?
Yeah. So the business side, I obviously have like my more traditional job, which is the sports analytics. And I have a great system there where I can work essentially as much as I want. Some weeks it's 40, 50 hours. A lot of the time it's closer to half-time, like 10 to 20 hours, which allows me to still produce content. Fortunately for the podcast, I have a great long-term sponsor, and that is a good income stream. Until this year, I was doing a lot of stuff with Learn Media, which was the agency, and we were putting together a lot of events. Well, not a lot of events, like some meetups, but organizing contracts, sponsorship contracts for other creators. To be honest, that business, it brought in a lot of money, but the operational overhead is not, it was just too stressful for me to manage, or playing a lot of telephone. And I try to index my life as much for freedom and doing the things that I enjoy rather than money. And the money and the freedom were not commiserate with how I'd like to live. So we're doing more just mostly creator meetups. If we do that, maybe 1 a year or something along those lines. And then for YouTube, I was doing some sponsors, but I'm just not making as much YouTube content creation. I'm just not making as many YouTube videos because I just feel like the niche that I have been historically operating in, which is the beginner education and the employment, I don't feel like I can authentically tell those stories as well as I used to. I haven't been a beginner data scientist in 8, 9, 10 years. I haven't interviewed for a data science job in probably 5 years, and I haven't interviewed data science candidates in 3 or 4 years. And so I would rather do this podcast and talk to people who are close to these things and have very good, well thought out opinions on them, rather than be trying to do a ton of research and talk about an aspect of the domain that I feel I'm personally out of touch with. And so I'll still probably make YouTube content. I'll be actually producing content around this meetup. But I believe I personally, for me to want to make it, I have to change the nature of it so it's more in line with what I believe to be my vision and who I am.
Yeah.
And we're at this stage of my life. I think one of the biggest traps so many of us will inevitably fall into if we're doing this for a while is that we just get stuck making the same content that we were making because it was successful. Yeah. And I think Tina's done a great job of like avoiding that. Alex has been able to grow in an awesome way, but he's making the same type of content because he truly like loves it. Yeah. And he was able to, at his career point, be able to like hyper focus into that. And my work is not related to this. I'm not doing YouTube full time. And again, it just feels like fairly inauthentic for me to continue to make that style of content. So obviously pivoted. I mean, I've talked with you a little bit about the other new podcasts that I've launched. And my focus is on that and Ken's Nearest Neighbors.
Yeah.
And fortunately, again, I have a good long-term sponsor with Ken's Nearest Neighbors. I might try to pick up one or two more, and then hopefully the other podcast really takes off as well. So just indexing on the things that I like the most and that I feel like I can create the most value in.
Yeah. Would you ever stop working on sports analytics?
It depends. If I stop enjoying it, if I stop feeling like the work is maybe like boring, or I don't feel like I'm creating value, yeah. But if things keep going how they're going, which is, it's not like a high growth business. We have contracts that we do. We occasionally pick up new ones, new sports and stuff like that. I really enjoy it. I don't know if I love the analytics side of that as much as I used to. I think that a lot of our models are, in the teams and sports we operate in, it's not like it's super cutting edge. It's more, hey, we need to get this baseline. And then I see more operational challenges than I do data challenges.
Yeah.
And so the hard thing for me is, do I just do normal consulting again, where you try to fix the organizational overhead before you fix the data infrastructure? It seems to me almost there's more value in that with a lot of organizations, like understanding how to philosophically look at data and how to implement it. So that's probably where the transition would occur. I mean, even now, I do like some oversight, I do some model building, but 50% of my work is communicating what we do to the teams and the players and things along those lines.
Translate the business problem and output, to stakeholders. The reason I'm asking, because part of me is a little jealous that you still have the connection to data science, because one of the reasons I haven't made an announcement on LinkedIn is because I feel I'm holding on to this data scientist identity. But I also want to be honest with my audience. I haven't been writing code since I quit my job. So, and sometimes I believe you probably shouldn't take in career advice from someone who's sitting on the bench. So I'm not giving you data science advice, but I've been in my career for a very long time, and then I have mentored people. I have interviewed a lot of guests. So I think I definitely learned a lot. I can still give career advice in general. And also, I think some of the career advice is not just for data scientists. It could be for software engineers or product managers. And I think maybe for me, it's all in my head. Maybe my audience don't care. But I sometimes still fear if I let go of this data scientist identity, this ex-Amazon senior data scientist label, who am I? Would my audience still like me? Maybe, going deeper, maybe I'm a recovering people pleaser. I want to meet people's expectation, but sometimes forget to really have the courage or creativity to go for the things that I want to do. Yeah.
So from my perspective, no one can ever take away the work that you've done, right? So if you were doing this and you were going into it from not having had any data background, that to me would be something, unless your audience already knew that, that would be more of an issue, right? Yeah. And I don't think that people who come into and interview data scientists or talk to them and don't necessarily have a data background, I don't think that's necessarily bad. But I think that that's, if you were suggesting that you did and you didn't have any experience in the domain, that would be an issue, right? I mean, like something that I'm grateful for and these types of things is, okay, I did my master's in computer science. I have like a technical background degree. I've worked at big companies. I've worked at like mid-sized growth companies, and then I've worked in the consulting. And there's also imposter syndrome about the consulting stuff for me, is because that's something I got in very early. I shaped the role myself. I was able to build out a lot of the infrastructure, and it's like, oh, it's not one of these big companies. It's not one of these more traditional roles that I've been in. But at the same time, if you're doing podcasts and you're asking questions, to me, the fact that you've been in those roles is what's important. It doesn't matter if you're working in it. You're talking to these people who have direct experience right now for that reason, because you're trying to learn something new.
Right.
And it's not, to be honest, like I realize this, and I would imagine you realize this too, is that like the people, at least on my podcast, they're not coming to see me.
Right.
They're coming to hear from the guest who has this unique experience that they're not going to get from me. And so if that's the case, I feel as though the fact that you're maybe not, working as a data scientist now, it doesn't really matter, as long as you can still do the research and ask the questions. And if you're dedicating more time to interviewing people, you probably have a better understanding of the breadth of the market and these types of things than someone who's just working in one role.
Yeah.
So you're able to index on these different things, and you're able to tell those stories in maybe even a more effective way now. Again, look at Alex Freeberg, right? He has, stopped working as an analyst, but he creates this analyst builder tool, and he's spending a ton of time researching the types of questions that people are asking. He's spending a lot of time doing research on that market, which is even probably more than he was doing in that one linear experience that he was having as an analyst and an analyst manager. So the way I view it, again, is like the threshold is, have you worked in the field? Okay, you have. Like, there shouldn't be any imposter syndrome around this, because again, it's not like you're standing on a mountain being like, you must do this because of at Amazon we do this and it's the only way to do it, right?
Yeah. I don't feel the imposter syndrome in hosting the podcast. It's more like changing the identity online. Like, should I still talk about my experience as a data scientist, which I think is fair. Like, a lot of people change their career, say from data science to product manager. It's just this identity I've been holding on for so long. It's very hard to let go. I even talked to my friend. I think sometimes what's preventing me from, say, fully going to like career coaching, talk about soft skills, maybe is the data science identity. Like, it got me here, but it won't got me there.
Yeah. Oh, I have a great book for you. It's called The Alter Ego Effect.
Yeah.
And it talks about how we view our identities in different ways, and how maybe sometimes it's okay to step into that identity and leverage it online. But if you have other identities where you're talking about other things, that can be really compelling and useful.
Yeah.
And, getting fused to an identity, I think, if you're not working as a data scientist, it might be good to step out of that, but you can always step back into it. It's not something that is so, again, we don't have just one identity. If I'm speaking on stage or if I'm on a podcast, I kind of turn into a different person.
Yeah.
Right.
You are.
But or if I'm hanging with my friends, I put on a different role. So I think it's totally okay to maybe step back and view it not as, oh, I just have this identity. You can, divide and conquer in a different way. Daliana, this was awesome. I highly recommend the Data Scientist Show to anyone listening.
Thanks.
There's plenty of room for more than one podcast in the data domain, but thank you for coming on. Any final thoughts?
Check out the Data Scientist Show. I have a newsletter called DalianaLiu.com. You can subscribe. And if you're interested in, career growth content, or want to work with me in small groups and one-on-one, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oops.